on the really big show here on November 3rd, the day before the budget and the day before possibly a new election in Canada. We'll see. I don't know. I haven't been to poly markets, so I imagine there's a bet on that. But I'd bet that the NDP supports this budget. But hey.
Yeah, the most likely outcome is one, because the NDP is so fractured, they don't have a leader. They've just got an interim leader. So the most plausible scenario that I can see is some of their MPs vote for it, because they only need a few. They only need a few extra votes. So a few of them do it, and then there's just a kind of, the explanation is, oh well, we don't actually have a party yet, or we're not really we're not like the classic NDP. We're in this period of transition, guys, and that'll be the explanation.
Plausible deniability.
But I think obviously as well, seeing that the ground has been laid, the territory has been mapped, hasn't it, in the last week or so, where all this talk about Christmas election and how much money it's going to cost, how nobody wants it, how anybody that resists this budget or questions this budget is a Grinch. That's what the language is going to be, and that'll be the justification as well. A lot of people, I think, or whoever it is that votes, let's say it's like a handful, I would say most of them are going to come out and say, we did this because we wanted to avert an election, because that would have been a tragedy. Democracy is a tragedy.
Well, the press conference that Mark Carney had on Saturday there, I mean, it highlighted so many things that are wrong with Canada. It was so revealing in so many regards. But we're going to play a small clip of it here. Let's play this clip first.
Mackenzie Gray with Global News. Did you apologize to Donald Trump about Ontario's anti-tariff ad?
I did. I did apologize to the president. The president was offended by the act, or by the ad, rather. And it's not something I would have done, which is to put in place that advertisement. And so I apologized to him. En français, oui, j'ai fait mes excuses pour l'avertissement de l'Ontario.
That's fine. I mean, the Liberals were asked, I think, 7 times in question period. Wouldn't answer the question. Media even accused Donald Trump of lying, saying, you know, when Trump said that Carney apologized, they said that he exaggerated, you know, always exaggerates, and he's lying. Turns out Mark Carney did apologize. And he also says later in the clip that he told Doug Ford not to run the ad. So that really...
Yeah, which is... continues that sort of scrap that's developing. He's thrown one back, hasn't he, to Dougie? And then I guess sometime this week we'll see Doug come out and throw another one. And it's just going to go on and on. These best of pals.
But this press conference is worth watching in full. I think it was about 34 minutes. We're not going to play the whole thing. We're going to play some bits and scraps of it here. But one of the things that was really revealing to me is in that room, in those press conferences, instead of pressing on some of these things, he was let off so many times, because in the questioning was like CBC, Radio Canada, Globe and Mail, CBC, New York Times for some strange reason.
New York Times got in there.
That's it. No independent media, nobody else that would press on this. No journalists that would actually press on anything. And it is so revealing how they control who gets in the room to ask even the questions.
And they chuckle along with Mark Carney. This was a perfect example of that kind of bonhomie that prevails between Carney and the journalists. There was a lot of, it was almost like flirtatious.
Yeah.
There was a lot of that going on. And this was at a time that Carney was making extraordinary admissions, but also just the most obvious thing of all, which is that he is nothing like the Prime Minister that he said he was going to be. This is not Mark Carney from the campaign. This is a different man. But for some reason, all of these journalists, the ones who are invited into the press conferences, have forgotten that, or they haven't realized that. I mean, it's incumbent upon them to say again and again and again and again, why is it that you got elected on being the tough guy and the one that was going to go into the ring with Donald Trump, and now you've got an orange tongue? What happened?
But there were so many things that were revealed in this thing. One is, like you just said, on bended knee, which he talks tough, but the reality is every time we've seen him with Trump, including this now, he's actually a completely different person. No pressing questions on Donald Trump. You were actually in his wake the whole time. Donald Trump came home, according to him and his people, with $2 trillion of signed deals. You came home with nothing other than a couple of guest books that you signed and promises to start trade negotiations. 7 months. Why are you just starting trade negotiations? And one of the deals that was signed was the South Koreans for LNG that they actually literally begged us for 2 years ago. No pressing on that. And then says that he called China the biggest threat to Canada, and now all of a sudden Canada and China we're going to talk about it later, are climate defenders, and we got lots in common with them. There was so many things in here that if there was actual, if you even got some people from the BBC or some of the American journalists in there, there's no way Mark Carney survives that press conference. But in this one, it was Toronto Blue Jays are going to do this, that, and another thing. And we're going to play some of these clips. But Team Canada, the other big one. You talk about Team Canada, you pitch Team Canada, you can't even control your premiers. If you told Doug Ford no, why did he still run the ad? And David Eby says he's still going to run the ad. We got this little clip here from CTV on Team Canada.
Pitched by federal and provincial leaders could be breaking down. CTV's Jeremy Sharon has more on the revelations of a disagreement over whether to run that anti-tariff ad that ultimately ended trade talks with the U.S.
Speaking to reporters in Asia for the last time before returning to Ottawa, the first questions Prime Minister Mark Carney faced were about his conversation with Ontario Premier Doug Ford about this anti-tariff ad that has halted trade negotiations with the U.S.
Since you're the person that's solely responsible for negotiations, did you inform Mr. Ford that this is something that you did not want to go forward with?
Yes.
And what came of that?
Well, you saw what came of it.
The Premier has previously defended running the ad, calling it a success. But Ford's office did not respond to a request for comment today.
Does this show that there is division within Team Canada, that the premiers don't trust you to negotiate?
I think there is, the individuals can speak for themselves, and they're practiced in speaking to themselves, and they will speak for themselves. There are other premiers who have different view in terms of the utility of those ads.
It's clear that these ads are working.
Manitoba's Wab Canoe supported Premier Ford's ad in a social media video, while BC's David Eby says he plans to go ahead with his own anti-tariff ad expected to run this month.
Who's in charge is the question, fundamentally.
Scott Reid, CTV News political commentator and former advisor to Prime Minister Paul Martin, believes there is tension between the different levels of government that should be resolved.
And there very well could be a problem, because you now have premiers saying, we're going to take steps that clearly, demonstrably, can have a measurable impact on Canada-U.S. relations.
But the premiers and the people in their provinces have different priorities. A new Nanos research survey for CTV News shows Canadians are split on how to prioritize support for industries impacted by U.S. tariffs. Agriculture ranked the highest. The auto sector was a close second, with softwood lumber, then aluminum rounding out the list.
That's good. That's good. I have no idea where Team Canada is and all this. I mean, that question should have been back. The reporter should have said, but your leadership, you said you promised us Team Canada. There's nothing but fractures. Nothing but fractures. And how can you have one voice representing Canada if everybody is going off and doing their own thing?
But it wasn't just Mark Carney. If we look at the two naughty boys that were highlighted there, Doug Ford and David Eby, cast your mind back several months, they were going non-stop about Team Canada and how they were going to do everything necessary. And I think they even used, Eby, I seem to recall, said something like, I'm a Canadian first. And they kept saying, language like that was being used again and again and again. But then when it started to be about themselves and their own reputations and their own survival, I guess, that was just hurled out of the window, wasn't it? And that is kind of, fundamentally, it's the primary weakness of Canada, which a question that we've asked many times, is Canada truly a country in the same way that the United States is a country, or France is a country, or whatever else? And that's a difficult question to answer. It's strangely enough, I think it's more like Russia, not just geographically, we've made that comparison before, but also just the nature of the strength of these individual units, like sub-national units. They're so powerful. Obviously, Russia's kind of solved that by getting themselves in with a tyrant,
we haven't done that, and I'm not saying we should do that, but I mean, as a consequence, it's not. Sometimes it really doesn't work, does it?
One of the other things that really is highlighted there is like Chrystia Freeland accused the Liberals of wasting 10 years on virtue signaling and identity politics. But that's all we see, though. When we look at Wab Canoe there, pretending to be in the old Ronald Reagan TV ad, it's all virtue signaling. David Eby, Doug Ford. The only person that actually has a level head in his negotiations is Daniel Smith, that speaks with authenticity and truth, whereas the rest of these things are all just like ploys and nonsense. And in Mark Carney's speech there, when it felt like he was getting a little bit of heat, what does he do? He brings out the old piece of red meat and throws Pierre Poilievre under the bus for his security clearance. The old piece of raw meat that has long been debunked even by CBC, but he threw it out there anyway. Shameful. Let's listen in on Pierre Poilievre and see what he has to say, though.
For the Prime Minister to apologize to Trump for the Ontario ad? And if not, what would you have done in that scenario?
Well, first of all, I would have provided this strong leadership so that provinces did not have to all run off in their own direction. Now, we don't see a variety of different governors in the U.S. being forced to run ads in Canada or do their own diplomacy. We see that because Mark Carney has been weak, indecisive, he has no plan, and he's broken all of his promises. So the provinces have been left with no choice but to fill the void that Carney's weak leadership has left behind. And then Mr. Carney has been very duplicitous. He approved the ad, and then he condemned the ad.
I mean, he must have approved it, because if he really wanted to stop it, he could have stopped it.
Of course, and they are such happy bedfellows that you would think that he has sufficient pull with Doug Ford to say, look, mate, please don't do this. Obviously, that isn't what happened, is it? I think it is rather duplicitous of Carney to say that. But I would just point out for Pierre Poilievre, he's acting there like, he's whiter than white, got very shiny, clean, and fragrant hands. But his strategy has also been exposed, hasn't it? He wanted really hard counter tariffs. What happened to that? What happened to that, Poilievre? Should we still implement counter tariffs? Haven't heard him say that in a while. It's like, let's be honest with ourselves. It's the entire Canadian political class that's failing here. It's not just the political class with power, which is the Liberal Party. But I feel like, unusually for Pierre Poilievre, because usually he's such an astute opposition leader, I think he's just completely fluffed his lines with the Trump situation. And increasingly, I hate to say it, I just feel like people aren't even listening to him anymore. He's just kind of like he's in the periphery now.
I almost think that if Canada is to be taken seriously and we're going to get capital investment back to Canada, we need a clean slate. Like, we need, especially the NDP and the Liberals need to go to an Arctic winter, and then perhaps even, the Conservatives need to really take a hard look at what they're doing, because this country needs leadership in the worst way. And right now, we look very, very weak, no matter how you look at it. And that's why capital is fleeing, and we're going to talk about that a lot more as we go on here. And then just the outright gaslighting, lying, half-truths or whatever. Listen to this one here on China. Remember, Mark Carney, when asked in the leadership, what's the biggest threat to Canada? He said it was China. Now listen to this.
Ian Austin from the New York Times. You described your meeting with President Xi as a turning point in relations with China. What changed to make that happen, and what needs to happen now to make sure that forward momentum continues and things don't reverse again?
I think we both described it as such. First point. I think at its core, it is about the way we treat each other, interact with each other. What we were saying earlier, this sort of pragmatic engagement. Where can we engage? Where are we not going to engage? Where do we agree? Where can we build? Where do we disagree? And we're not. And being clear about that. And there may be some bumps along the way when there's some ambiguity, but ironing those out as quickly as possible. And then there is, because there are a lot of areas where cooperation makes sense. Look, I'll give you an example. We are two countries that care about climate change and care about global solutions to climate change. Right there's an enormous area for cooperation. We are two countries, at least Canada traditionally has been a country who understands the international monetary and financial system and the changes in the international monetary and financial system, understand the importance of financial stability, the issues with transition and other aspects. This is an issue when you're the rising economic power. So there's another area of engagement there. So there's a host of places where there is an alignment of issue above and beyond the direct commercial ties.
What was that? Whoa, literally.
Indeed. Not silver-tongued. His best friends might say silver-tongued, but he's shown once again his orange tongue, or red tongue maybe in that case. But he also went on as well. He was asked, I don't know if it was the same answer.
Just hang on one second. Can you put up the chart there? Just put up the chart where Liam keeps going though. Okay, keep going. Yep.
He was asked what he'd achieved, basically. Like what had actually, I think he was asked like about the tariffs. That was it. He was saying, have you got any progress on the tariffs, canola, all the rest of it? And he was just so he seemed so defeated. He seemed like such a loser. I'm sorry to say it, Monsieur Carney. He just sounded so pitiable because he was just saying, oh, that's going to take a very long time, and we're not there yet. We haven't made progress yet. He's like saying, you don't just do that out of nowhere. It takes many, many meetings. And I was thinking, like, hold on, mate. Just a couple of days ago, Donald Trump had one of these meetings, came out of it, and had a new trade arrangement with China. Like, evidently, it is possible. Obviously, the US is an exceptional country in many ways, but still, it's possible. He was making it seem as if it was like, that's just the way it is. It's just a fact of life. Like, you don't just have a meeting with China and come away with changes to your trade policy. Well, actually, some countries do.
So what really happens is all the people underneath you are making these deals ahead of time, and then when you show up, you sign the paperwork. That's what Trump does. His team is there making the deals ahead of time, like months ahead of time, making the deals, and then you show up like you're the hero and you sign a deal. But all the groundwork is laid. I mean, Trump lays that out. Like, even these peace deals, Rubio and all these other guys are out there laying out the groundwork. Trump shows up for the signing. He's not negotiating these things. 7 months, nothing. And then we talk about I have one more point though to make on this. I advise every Canadian to take a couple of shots of common sense, just take a couple of big swigs of common sense and go watch that full press conference and see if you don't feel like pulling out all your hair because of all the gaslighting, all the half-truths, all the answers that mean nothing. And this, especially this climate change one. Here's the proof right here on climate change. Canada and China care about climate change. What does that chart show you right there? The burgundy one is coal, by the way. That's China.
It should be black. They love the black stuff.
So.
And the blue one is oil. So look at it as it grows. I mean, this is because China, in many ways, where this begins here. If you go back to sort of Mao died, what was it, 1978? Something like that. What, 76? Around about that time, sometime in the 70s. And that's when China basically began to industrialize properly after that, when you started to get Deng Xiaoping came in and they had reforms. So that answers quite a lot of that. Because under Mao, the country was a basket case. Mao was a complete fool, and he ran the country foolishly. So when they started to run it properly, it explodes in growth. But the thing is, you hear a lot about per capita, and it's like, that's why Canada's very naughty, apparently, because even though Canada contributes nothing really in the grand scheme, per capita it's a lot. But China's responsible for about a third of all global emissions. They don't have a third of the world's population. So even China is, it's overshot its per capita allowance, if you want to look at it that way. So, yeah, I mean, obviously China's no friend to the global climate, to summarize.
Or democracy, or a bunch of different things. Do you know what I mean? Human rights
Canada,
violations.
Let's be honest.
Yeah.
But it is a very big country, and it's an enormous economy. So I understand why. I think it's perfectly reasonable to behave like that to China. I have to say, I don't disagree with Carney's approach at all, or with the Americans either. I think, to an extent, actually, a Canadian leader does have to be quite deferent and submissive and servile in the presence of those two giant beasts. That kind of makes sense, and that is in Canada's interest. What I object to, and what I feel like deserves to be highlighted, is what he said when he was trying to be elected, what he promised. That's how our system works, after all. They promise things to us, and we make a decision whether or not we pick them to lead us. He promised certain things about China and the US, and he has not carried through those promises. So that's the problem.
If this is a Batman movie, Mark Carney is Two-Face, and that's what you just said, and that's the problem I have. And that's what I think everybody sees is when he stands in front of the podium talking to Canadians, it's one thing, and then when he actually is dealing with these people, it's another thing. And there's no deals. That's the big part. 7 months, no deals, nothing of consequence, nothing.
Well, the things of consequence are that it's worse. It's worse with the United States. It's worse with China.
And President Xi,
that's where it's gone. It's gone the other side. It's gone the other direction.
Every time he does this climate stuff, he's going to come and pitch this carbon capture thing, and this is what he's setting people up for. Because President Xi has said he will not do anything with climate change that hurts the wealth of the Chinese people. Canada, on the other hand, will destroy our whole economy for it.
I mean, it's baffling, isn't it? It's hard to wrap your head around it, especially when, again, you look at this. You still got the picture up there of their energy mix. Look at the growth in use of coal, for God's sake. This is what people. This is like mapped out, visualized when people say that China's building X amount of coal-fired power stations every month or whatever. Several. I can't remember what the statistic is, but they are expanding coal quite dramatically. Like, there it is. Just look at it. The dirtiest fuel that we still use, next to like dung and things like that, which they still use in parts of Africa.
Our producer just mentioned 2 a month, I think, that they're putting into play. So there you go.
Yeah.
We got another clip.
But this is the thing: the Chinese will always prioritize China. They are, after all, nationalists of a kind, at least communist nationalists, and that's what they're doing.
We got another clip here from that conference here, or the press.
Next question. Hi, Prime Minister. Sarah Ritchie with the Canadian Press. If you cast your mind back to April during the election campaign, I know it feels like a long time ago for me, you told Canadians that China was the biggest security threat to this country and to Canadians. Do you still believe that to be the case?
I think we have to manage all our threats. There are a number of threats from a country mentioned, Russia. We've non-state actor threats, which are material. I guess, one of the advantages of having your security clearance is you're better informed about some of the threats, and I highly recommend that anyone either in the position of responsibility or seeking it has their security clearance.
There you go. You offered them up.
That's the best. That's the best clip. That's the one that, just play that over and over again, really. That should just be the show. Because everything in that just sort of proves all the points that we've basically ever made about the Canadian democratic system, the Canadian political system. You've got a journalist there who almost seems like the next words out of her breath are going to be like, so what are you doing later? Like, can I get your, or would you like my number? It was like, I know it's been a long time. It feels like, it's like, shut up. You're supposed to hold this man to account. You are disgracing yourself. And he as well, he gives it back, and he loves to flirt with the journalists all the time. It's like these little glances and winks and things. It's very unprofessional. It's not what Canadians want to see at this time. I mean, I think it's atrocious. But then also his answer, it's not just politics. He said China was the biggest threat to Canada. He campaigned on that. He's prime minister because he said that in part, and now he won't. And now he's taking a completely different tune. He won't even answer that question anymore. That subverts our democracy. That is subversive. That is, talk about threats to democracy. That should be top of the list. He's made a mockery of our democracy. And will he be held to account for it? Obviously not. And it's left to us in this obscure corner of the internet to even mention it.
That piece of red meat he threw there, Pierre Poilievre there, the journalist should have replied. That's been debunked already. And it's it's a non-issue, yet you continue to use it. Why? It's just ridiculous, right? But like you said,
but also, you know, like,
on
just be
bended
honest.
knee,
You got to at least be an approximation of the person you were when you campaigned, when you're in power. You know, otherwise, what are we doing? Like, what is the system?
again,
If this is what we get.
the contrast is Donald Trump, who a lot of Democrats hate. He is who he said he was going to be. Everything he said he's going to do, he's doing. Whether they like it or
He's
not.
also done a lot of things that he never mentioned. But
Yeah, but the stuff he mentioned
in
that he
truth,
ran
his
on.
the main thrust of his campaign related to immigration and economic reordering, and he's done both of those things. So I guess in that sense, yeah. But he's also done a hell of a lot of things that just came out of absolutely nowhere. Like pardoned loads of people. He pardoned this Chinese crypto guy and then was asked about it and said, "I don't even know who that is." Like, he's done a lot of completely bizarre things. Obviously, this situation with Venezuela, that was never mentioned. Like, you know, obviously Trump has taken the P as well.
His main campaign promises he's delivering on.
Yeah, the main two, yeah. Whereas Carney's main one was Team Canada, all these infrastructure projects.
Strongest economy in the G7. Strongest economy in the G7.
And sign all these new trade deals with other partners. Yeah. But he can kind of say, oh, no, like, that's going to take many years. Like, get back in your box. But you could have said that about Trump. Like, Trump's got illegal immigration dramatically down, like almost zero. Like
he said, zero.
And well, he says that, yeah. But you could easily, in Trump's position, you could easily have said, oh no, like a problem like this, it's going to take me years. It's going to take me 4 years to fix this. Like, obviously, Trump is kind of, in that sense, makes him look a little bit ineffective, doesn't he?
So CBC getting a lot of heat for not having conservatives on the show. So Rosie Barton, the chief misinformation officer at CBC, had Pierre Poilievre on. And you tell me if it seems a little biased. Just listen in on this clip here.
It seems like everywhere Mark Carney goes, with these grand meetings and photo ops, we end up with more tariffs. His failures abroad are costing us at home.
He met with the Chinese president, though, and they made a decision that their officials were going to get together and try and solve the trade irritants. He is trying to make some progress, no? You don't see those things as a bit of progress?
What progress? Can you name one tariff line that he's reduced abroad?
No, not at this stage, no.
Not one. No. He said 7 months.
So what would
He's been on 20 trips.
What would you like to see him do then? What do you think is the missing piece here?
Keep his promise.
Yeah, but how? It's easy to say that. It's the how that's difficult.
Well, the how, I said that I would face President Trump and the rest of the world from a position of strength. Right now, we're in a position of weakness. The Americans know we can't sell our goods to anyone else because we don't have pipelines and LNG plants to get our most valuable export to other markets. I would pass the Canadian Sovereignty Act, which would rapidly greenlight and legalize pipelines, LNG plants, and other infrastructure.
But the government is doing some of that. There's an LNG plant that's happening. There are major projects.
Approved by Stephen Harper.
Well, there's an expansion of it. There's an expansion of it. And the Major Projects Office, it does allow them to get around laws and regulations. You know, that's the goal of it.
That's the goal. We're 7 months in, and the clock is ticking. I think we've been through enough goal setting, and now it's time for results achieved, and we're not getting any results. Mr. Carney won't even tell us if he supports an oil pipeline to the Pacific. His energy minister says it's just too hypothetical. What do you mean hypothetical? We had a project that was approved prior to the Liberals taking office. So here we are with no progress on expanding our resources or getting things done. It's all very good that he's setting up these offices and agencies in Ottawa, but I've got news for him. We're not going to make our economy economically independent by setting up new bureaucracies in Ottawa.